The Name of the Wind is my favorite book of all time, and its sequel, The Wise Man's Fear, is on my top 10 list of favorite books of all time. So in this video, I'm going to tell you why they're both so great. Welcome to another episode of Anchor's Points. I am Anchor Pete, and today we are going to be talking about Patrick Rothfuss's Kingkiller Chronicles series. For this video, I am particularly proud of the thumbnail art that I'm using. The thumbnail art was made by my friend Bruno, who is a graphic designer, and I think he did a fantastic job. Bruno asked me, who's this guy that's in this picture? Who am I making you look like? And I was like, Bruno, I'm going to tell you. Now, whether you are Bruno or you're my mom, you're one of the other people that are subscribed to this channel, or you're brand new here today, if you could please hit a like button, that would be so great. Now, why do I love The Name of the Wind and The Wise Man's Fear so much? Well, first off, the writing is excellent. I've seen a lot of reviews where they talk about these books, and a lot of people, right away, they give praise to Patrick Rothfuss. And it's well-deserved. He makes you feel so much for the main character, Kvothe. You just want to be around him. You want him to be your friend. Every time he fails, you feel bad. Every time he succeeds, you are so happy for him and his friends. A Wise Man's Fear that I just finished is 1,000 pages. And when you're reading a fantasy book like that, it does start to meander. And you do feel like, okay, when are we going to get to the interesting stuff? But the thing is that Kvothe is just so charming. And he is the narrator of the story. And so you just want to sit there and read what he has to say and hear his opinions and his little clever ideas about each scenario that he's in. The writing is fantastic, and the main character is super charming and endearing. And I know that I've seen an interview with Patrick Rothfuss where he said that was his goal. His goal was to have a character piece, but he didn't want it to be like, the literature that gets all these awards and accolades where it's just a character drinking tea and staring out the window. He wanted to be set in this fantasy world where there's magic and crazy things going on. And that is a huge accomplishment. In the first book, we see Kvothe and his family, and he's still pretty much a kid. He is an Dimitar, and I'm going to just warn you, I'm going to butcher all the names in these books, I'm sorry. The Dimitar are people that are like a traveling troupe that go around and they play songs and they tell stories and they have plays. His father's an amazing actor and singer, and this gets passed down to Kvothe. Kvothe is an amazing actor, and it comes in handy throughout his trials that he experiences as he gets older. So his father starts making a song about the Chandrain. And the Chandrain are this mysterious group of creatures, and no one really knows what they are because they're only told in like little whispers and old fairy tales. And so his father starts to write some lines about them, and this makes the Chandrain come after Kvothe's troop. And the Chandrain slaughter everyone in the troop, including Kvothe's parents. Now, Kvothe is able to get away, but he saw every one of the Chandrain, and he wants to learn more about them. And that becomes the guiding force for Kvothe in both of these books. He goes on these little separate adventures, which are fantastic, but the main thing that you're most excited about is him finding out the truth about the Chandrain and how he might fight them. Now, Kvothe, to learn about the Chandrain, wants to go to the university, which is basically where the brightest minds in the land go, and they learn about science and they learn about magic. Before he can get to that point, though, he has to survive. And so right after his parents die, he spends time in the woods just trying to survive. And he has his lute, and he keeps playing his lute over and over every day, the whole entire day, just to keep himself from losing his mind. And he becomes this amazing lute player. He eventually makes it to a city called Trebon, and while he's there, he goes through some of the worst times in his life, and he's beaten, and it's really tough. You're there with him on the streets, and you can see how horrible his existence is, but it only makes you root more for him when he starts to have more success. On his way to the university, after he leaves Trebon, he meets Denna, and Denna is the love of Kvothe's life. And we learn about Denna through these two books. She's mysterious. Denna has many male suitors that come to try to, woo her and marry her, and she turns them all down. and she puts her guard up. But she will be with Kvothe for a little while, and then she'll leave. And then she'll turn up again in his life, and then she'll leave. So eventually Kvothe makes it to the university, and now he wants to learn about the Chandrain, and he also wants to potentially meet with Denna again, and he's infatuated with her. At the university, he meets one of the main villains of his life, an aristocrat named Ambrose, who tricks Kvothe when they first meet. Ambrose works in the Stacks, which is basically the main library of the university, where all of the books from all different corners of the world talking about different sciences and histories are kept. And to use the Stacks, it's this dark place. There's actually no sunlight coming in because it could ruin the books or the scrolls or whatever. And so you have to use these special lamps to navigate through the Stacks. And Ambrose tricks Kvothe. He tells him to bring some candles in there. And Kvothe gets in serious trouble for bringing candles into the Stacks because they could burn the whole place down. So he's banned from the Stacks. So in the first book, Kvothe is trying to figure out, how do I get back into the Stacks? I want to research, I want to learn more about the Chandrain. What can I do? So Ambrose is a constant thorn in Kvothe's side, but also there is the problem of getting the funding to go to the university. And for me, that's why I loved the first book so much, because it reminded me of my college days. You see, Kvothe is only a teenager when he gets to the university, but it's like a college experience. He's sitting there trying to figure out, how am I going to pay for myself while I'm learning? And I need to make money, but I also have to study because this is the place to be. This is the university. And so I have to spend all my time studying, but I also have to eat. In the wise man sphere, Kvothe is still in the university. And people that love the books, they love the university stuff because it seems so interwoven with Kvothe's story. He's trying to learn about the Chandrain. He's trying to learn more about the different types of magic in the world. And also Denna lives in the city that's near the university for a time. Kvothe ends up acquiring a few different debts while at the university. And it's so interesting to see, well, is he going to get out of paying the debt? Is something really horrible going to happen to him if he can't pay the debt? And that's why I love the first book so much. Now in the second book, this is where people get a little upset because Kvothe leaves the university. And a noble recommends him to a guy known as the mayor. And it's not M-A-Y-O-R, it's M-A-E-R. And he is this incredibly wealthy noble that lives in this place called Severin. And there is Severin Low and there's Severin High. And Severin Low is where the commoners and the poor people live. And Severin High, which is atop a cliff that looks down on Severin Low, is where the nobility live. And the mayor is the most wealthy of all of them. All of a sudden, once he gets to Severin High, there's this level of political intrigue that comes into the story. It's all about Kvothe navigating his way through the nobility there. And they have this really interesting system that's based on the rings that you wear and the rings that you collect. And there's different types of rings, gold, silver. When you go to call on someone, you send them a specific type of ring. And the type of ring that you send them shows how you feel about them in the hierarchy of nobility. Patrick Rothfuss does this fantastic job of setting up this system and how the rules work, and it's just so intriguing. Eventually, the mayor sends Kvothe on a mission. And this part reminded me of D&D so much. I know that Patrick Rothfuss plays D&D. I know that he's been involved in some of those live showings of live D&D games that you might see on Twitch or YouTube. And when you see this mission that Kvothe goes on, it just is so clearly D&D. There's a barbarian type, there's a fighter type, there is a monk, and then there is a ranger. And then of course, Kvothe is the bard, right? So I don't really want to go into the details about that mission, but I found it to be super interesting. Kvothe forms a relationship with the monk character on the mission. The monk comes from a land called Adamir, and he's an Adam. And there's this whole culture with the Adam that we learn about. And unfortunately I'm gonna have to spoil this, but at one point Kvothe has to travel to Adamir with the monk, whose name is Penthe, because Tempe's gonna get in trouble for teaching Kvothe about their ways. There's a whole section of the book where Kvothe is in Adamir and he's learning the ways from the Adam. And it's just super intriguing. And that in itself is like a book in itself. You could break the Wise Man's Sphere into sections. There's the university section, there's the Severin section, there's the Atom section, and before that, there is also a section where Kvothe ends up in the Fae, and he is with Felurian. Some people might look at the scene where Kvothe is in the Fae realm as like a detraction from the main story, and they want him to move on. But there are some really, really interesting parts in that section. And Kvothe does meet, besides Felurian, who he spends all of his time with in the Fae realm, he does meet this other mystical creature. And I don't want to spoil this one part because it's really great. But it is one of the highlights of the whole series. Kvothe's story. He will eventually make it to this inn, where he will be the innkeeper, and he'll go by the name of Kvothe. And he's basically hiding away from the rest of the world. We don't know why he's hiding away from the rest of the world and why he's changed his name. A man who goes by the title of Chronicler is there, and he is, over the course of 3 days, writing down all the details that Kvothe is telling him about his story, his life story. And so the first book, The Name of the Wind, is the first day of Chronicler taking down Kvothe's story, and then The Wise Man's Sphere is the second day, and then the third day will be the third book, which I believe is The Doors of Stone, or The Door of Stone. We don't know if Kvothe has eventually faced the Chandrain before he ended up at this inn, or if he's going to at this future point. But we do know that something has changed in Kvothe, and he doesn't have this lust for life and this ability to learn more. He is just very content to live out his days. And within the first book and in the second book, they allude to the fact that he is basically waiting for his time to die. So this is ultimately why I love these books, because Kvothe feels like your friend after you read these books. You've gone through his life with him, and when you get to this point where it seems like he's waiting to die, you feel like that's your friend that's waiting to die. And it just gave me this bittersweet kind of feeling that I was saying goodbye to a friend. Now, his story's not over. There's still a third book that people have been waiting years and years to read. But in a way, I almost kind of don't want to read that book, because I don't want to see Kvothe die if he is going to die, or at least have his story end. I could sit here for an hour and go into all the different characters that have come into Kvothe's life and talk about how great they are. But I don't want to give you more details than I already have. I want you to go read this book and enjoy it. The reason why I love this series so much is because, as I said, Patrick Rothfuss is so great at making you feel for Kvothe and relate to him that he feels like a friend, and you want to see what happens next. And I like the different turns that his life takes. It kind of reminds me of Sons of Anarchy or Breaking Bad, where every time the main characters would try to get themselves out of a hole, they'd end up digging another hole that they'd have to get out of, and it was just like from one hole to the next. And that's the way that Kvothe's life is like. It's like this quote from I think it's John Lennon, where he says, "Life is what happens when you're making other plans." Kvothe has this plan to maybe get with Denna, and he has this plan to eventually find out who the Chandrain are and confront them. But along the way, he has all these misadventures, and it feels so realistic. It feels like life. But there's magic, and there's the Fae, and then there's this D&D side quest, and then there's this sort of monk culture that's based on living your life with a sense of honor. It's everything. It's this smorgasbord of fantasy, and yet it feels like the real life, and it's fantastic. So I'm going to use my Clemmy scale to review this book. As we know, 5 Clemmys means it's great. What do you think it's going to be? Of course, it's 5 Clemmys for The Wise Man's Sphere. I can't wait to read the third book. And like I said before, if you have read these books, please let me know what you think about them. Okay, so that's it. That is Anchor's Points. Please stay safe.